Welcome to basking in God's grace. As we look forward in celebration of this Holy Week, as most of us call it, let's look back to the very reason of this holiday in Luke chapter 23 and chapter 24. May this remind us and to be refreshed in the most significant event that happened in the history of man, in that brought us out from darkness of life to the light of hope. We read that the crowd shouted louder and louder, demanding that Jesus be crucified. In their voices prevailed. So Pilate sentenced Jesus to die as they demanded. As they had requested, he released Barabbas, the man in prison for insurrection and murder. Two others, both criminals, were laid out to be executed with him. When they came to the place called the Skull, they nailed him to the cross. And the criminals were also crucified, one on his right and one on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing." And the soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. The crowd watched and the leaders mocked. "He saved others," they said. "Let him save himself if he is really God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers mocked him by offering him a drink of sour wine. They called out to him, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." One of the criminals hanging beside him mocked Jesus, saying, "So you are the Messiah, are you? Prove it by saving yourself and us too, while you are at it." But the other criminal protested and said, "Don't you fear God, even when you have been sentenced to die? We deserve to die for our crimes, but this man hasn't done anything wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replied, "I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise." It was about noon, and darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. The light from the sun was gone, and suddenly the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn down the middle. Then Jesus shouted, "Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands." And with those words he breathed his last. Now Joseph, a member of the Jewish High Council, went to Pilate and asked Jesus' body. Then he took the body down from the cross and wrapped it in a long sheet of linen cloth and laid it into a new tomb that had been carved out of rock. This was done late on Friday afternoon, the day of preparation, as the Sabbath was about to begin. Very early on Sunday morning, the women went to the tomb, taking the spice they had prepared. They found that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. So they went in, but they didn't find the body of the Lord Jesus. As they stood there puzzled, two men suddenly appeared to them, clothed in dazzling robes. The women were terrified and bowed with their faces to the ground. Then the man said, "He isn't here. He is risen from the dead. Remember what he told you back in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be betrayed into the hands of sinful men, and be crucified and then buried, in that he would rise again on the third day. This is not a fairy tale, but it is a real part of history. It would be scientifically impossible, but it is historically proven to be true. Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection is the greatest and most historical event of all history. It is all because of the love of God to humankind. The most relevant message in the world is the fact that Christ died for us. He died in our place. He shed His blood for us. Without Christ's experience, no one can get to heaven. When the thief said to Jesus, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom," and Jesus replied, "I assure you today you will be with me in paradise." This is one of the most astounding answers in the history of the world. And this is how simple the gospel is. The saving grace of God is not that complicated to be understood. May His death, burial, and resurrection be our focus as we celebrate this holiday season. May our appreciation to the suffering and resurrection of Jesus leads us to the realization that God is our only hope in life. Thank you for tuning in. Keep basking in God's grace.